Many people think of the Arkham games as a trilogy, with Asylum as its strong start, City as the peak, and Night as the disappointing finish. However, there are in fact 4 main Arkham games, as much as many fans don't want to admit it. In fact, this often forgotten or intentionally ignored Arkham game is actually pretty good, and I seriously don't think it deserves as much hate as it gets. Yes, lads, ladies, and everyone in between, today we're talking about Batman Arkham Origins. Batman Arkham Origins was a rather unusual entry in terms of its development. It's the only game not developed by Rockstar, but instead by Warner Bros. Montreal. It's also a prequel to the other games in the series, set during Batman's second year in fighting crime. The game has us as the Dark Knight meeting many of Batman's most famous rogues, such as Bane, Deathstroke, and even the Joker. This was a controversial decision, as Rocksteady killed off the Joker at the end of Arkham City, so to have him show up here feels like he never died. It actually cheapens the ending of Arkham City, since we know he comes back in the next game anyway, as if he never left. I would have preferred to see Batman take on a different kind of villain in one of these games. Not an insane supervillain, but someone more dipped in street level crime and conspiracy, like the tease of Black Mask for the first half of the game. This is also the only game not to feature the duo of Kevin Conroy and Mark Hamill, but instead has Roger C. Smith as Batman and Troy Baker as the Joker. Troy Baker does fine, but I absolutely love Smith's take on the Bat. He adds a real raw aggression to him, which fits for this point in the timeline, as Batman has not carefully fine-tuned his crime fighting, and especially his interrogation techniques.
How many lives did you just take?
None! I think that was just a little stocking stuffer, a construction site blocking my view.
I like that he has these moments of emotional outburst. It makes Batman a more fallible and therefore a more relatable character, instead of the untouchable wall of stoicism that can often come from poor Batman writing. He's a hard character to write for, because he needs to be at the same time fallible, and yet you could buy him being 4 steps ahead of his enemies when he defeats them. It's a really tough balance. I quite enjoyed the story told by this game, one about the Bat being out of his depth, but still pulling through despite all of this. However, I do wish we had focused more on the crime aspect in Gotham, with Batman uncovering a multi-layered plot rather than the usual supervillain shtick. The best told aspect, I thought, was Batman's relationships that are established here. His rivalry to working relationship with Captain Gordon, his meeting with Barbara, and how his relationship to Alfred changes. Also, we get yet another dive into the twisted relationship between the Bat and the Clown, with us taking a brief dive into the Joker's mind to see how he views the dichotomy of the two. I felt that the game was a bit unfocused though, as the concept of 8 assassins sent after Batman could have been a game on its own without the whole Joker plot, but they get pushed to the side very quickly after the Clown is brought into the plot. The main complaint I have about the story is more from a presentation perspective. So many of the game's cutscenes are pre-rendered, which, don't get me wrong, that probably looked really good when the game came out. But it's 10 years later, and they're starting to look a bit pixelated, and it really hurts the game's longevity. As if it wasn't ignored enough, but now with these dated looking cutscenes added in, it really doesn't help its case. Plus, they're rendered at 30 FPS, which, don't get me wrong, it looks very filmic. But it clashes so much with the very smooth 60 FPS gameplay. Arkham Stealth is here as usual, and it's honestly not changed since City. Stealth does have a bigger presence here than it did in City, because we are put in more scenarios that require not being seen, rather than City's very combat heavy approach. It's a perfect mix of City and Asylum, where those two lean too much into one aspect each. Origins strikes a better balance. One gadget that really impacts stealth is the remote claw, which can be used to give yourself more perch points or pulling interactive objects to enemies like fire extinguishers to create a smoke cloud. Combat is also mostly unchanged from Arkham City, but I'm okay with this because City had some amazing combat, and more of a good thing isn't bad. In fact, enemy aggression seems to have been increased, which led to combos being easier to maintain for me, as enemies would charge me a lot more, leading to less dropped combos because an enemy was too far away. All the variants of enemies are here, with knives, shields, brutes, armed, unarmed, and I love that each requires a difference in approach to take down, helping to keep combat interesting by treating it like a puzzle. Basic attacks and counters are still here, with the special combo moves for achieving a combo of 8, and free flow focus makes an appearance too upon hitting 12. Boss fights are a slight downgrade from City, but not nearly as bad as most of Asylum's bosses. Firefly was pretty gadget heavy, Copperhead was simple but great in concept, and Bane was by far my favourite. We fight Bane 3 times. The first 2 times he operates as an enemy who charges before we can stun him and use a beatdown on him, but the final fight takes on a more interesting stealth approach. He takes his venom and roids out to a size too strong to fight head on. So we need to sneak around, take him down from the floor grates, the vents, or sneaking up behind him. Towards the end of this fight, our detective mode is jammed, leading to us needing to use sound cues to locate Bane, and I love this as a shake-up by removing tools from the player that they may have become very reliant on. Deathstroke was another great fight. It feels like a true skilled one-on-one duel with a master martial artist, with you needing to counter Deathstroke with specific timing and needing to get the upper hand to put the smackdown on him. But he can counter you too and puts you on the back foot, amplifying this duel feeling. And of course I can't forget about the best boss of them all, the Electrocutioner. I really enjoyed the increased amount of crime scene reconstruction here, with the main example being Black Mask's apartment. This aspect of Batman isn't covered too much in the Arkham games or in most superhero games, but Batman is said to be the world's greatest detective, so it's nice to actually see it for once in gameplay, instead of him just working everything out for us in dialogue or a cutscene. Many of the gadgets here are to be expected. Batarangs, explosive gel, Batclaw. However, some of the upgrades like the grapnel boost and remote hacking device, basically just the cryptographic sequencer, shouldn't be here in terms of the timeline. One of the problems making a prequel, but I think that the gadgets are recontextualized and the names changed enough for me to just brush this aspect aside, as it allows expansion in gameplay despite the many story conflicts. Each game so far in the Arkham series has expanded the scope of the explorable area, and Arkham Origins is no different, with it letting us into 2 of Gotham's islands, with one being quite familiar as the undestroyed version of the area that would eventually become Arkham City. I have a few problems with this version of Gotham, however. First problem is that Batman's movement speed while gliding feels a little too slow for how large this city is. When I got to the side quests, I ended up using fast travel quite a bit because it was just so much more efficient. Gotham also didn't feel very memorable. This is probably because the whole thing is covered in a layer of snow, leading to it all looking very similar, unlike the cold blues of the GCPD or the warm oranges of the steel mill in the last game. My final issue with Gotham is that certain areas felt very restricted due to a lack of verticality. I never got a look over the whole city from the skies, as there was always at least one building that towered far above my head, even at the peak height of my glide. This all led to me not enjoying moving around Gotham like I did Arkham City or even the Asylum. I just briefly mentioned side quests, and honestly these ones felt more underwhelming than the ones I completed last time. All the side quests felt like busy work this time around. Destroy 5 drug stashes and beat Black Mask, destroy 5 arms caches and defeat Penguin, defuse 3 bombs and defeat Anarchy, and so on and so forth. It really annoyed me actually, and eventually I just switched off as I completed these side quests. Enjoying myself was not a problem though with this game's amazing challenge mode. It's again mostly the same as previous games, with round by round combat trying to keep a combo going to achieve a high score, but compared to Arkham City, Origins lacks in the character department, with only Batman and Deathstroke being playable. Playing as Deathstroke was a cool novelty. He plays very similar to Batman, but his strikes clearly show intent to kill with how hard he impacts against his foes, especially when using his staff. I enjoyed my time with him, playing on my favourite map in this game, 100-1. This map challenges you with defeating 100 enemies of various types, with shields, knives, and every other variant of enemy in this hard as nails challenge. Other than that, Batman operates as standard here. So, with all my thoughts on the main game now laid bare, I'm sure you're wondering what I thought of this game's DLC. I will not be talking about the extra costumes or the challenge campaign set during Bruce's training, as I did not purchase them. But I will talk about the main story DLC, Cold Cold Heart. This DLC is set on New Year's Eve as we meet the Iceman himself, Mr. Freeze, as he kidnaps the man who made him what he is in an attempt to save his dying wife Nora. We all know Mr. Freeze's story by now as it's been done to death, but the gameplay does throw some cool twists. We actually get a short section at the start where we play as Bruce Wayne with no gadgets, detective vision or anything. This was interesting as it made me more cautious in stealth, as I didn't know where enemies were every second. The extreme environment suit was also a pretty cool gameplay feature, being able to break ice walls by heating them up and using thermal batarangs to free interactables from their icy tombs. The boss fight with Mr. Freeze wasn't as good as other fights with the snowman, but I did enjoy it for the most part. So, with all that said, what did I think of Arkham Origins? I really enjoyed it. It is nowhere near my favourite Arkham game, but if you mainline the story and pay attention to mainly that, it's a great time. The side content is unfortunately what brings it down for me, but I still recommend you give Arkham Origins a try if you haven't, and if you have, maybe try giving it another go. But that's all the time I have today, and I'll see you all next time. Bye! Hello everyone and welcome to the post-video ramble. So, as you would have probably guessed, the next video in this series is meant to be Arkham Knight. That's going to be postponed for a while. I'm going to postpone it indefinitely until I can figure out what the fuck has happened to my copy of Arkham Knight. It keeps crashing on me for some reason, and I'm unsure why. So what I'm going to do is the next video for this series will be Gotham Knights, and that will basically sum up my thoughts on that game. We'll wrap that up, and I'll come back to Arkham Knight at some point. Not sure when, but then in the meanwhile we'll focus on some other games. Currently working on a video for RE4 Remake Separate Ways as well, because my RE4 Remake video came out, the DLC came out shortly after, and fucked up my whole thing. There's a couple others in the works as well, but I won't spoil them, and I want to keep this ending nice and sweet. So, that's enough from me. I hope you guys have enjoyed, and I'll see you next time. Bye!